She cheated with my best friend, then stole $350, $0 in inheritance, and tried to claim our house during divorce. Now I'm losing everything to her lies and manipulations. I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, writing about how my wife turned out to be a complete and utter nightmare. The kind of nightmare I didn't see coming, even when the signs were there. You know that feeling when your gut tells you something off, but you tell yourself you're overthinking. Yeah, I had that for months. But what really shattered me was how quickly everything unraveled once I finally found out the truth. Truth I wish I'd seen earlier, but somehow I was blind to it until everything came crashing down. And I had been married for 8 years. We met in college, got serious fast, and I thought we had a good, stable life. I worked hard as a project manager at a construction firm, and she was a real estate agent, seemed like a perfect match. She was beautiful, confident, and always seemed to have her act together. Or so I thought. Looking back now, there were little things that should have raised alarms: missing jewelry late, nights that she brushed off as client meetings, and a sudden interest in designer clothes I never remembered her wanting before. But I was busy with work, and she was good at hiding her tracks. Then came the signs I didn't want to see. She started getting secretive with her phone, always keeping it close, even when she went to the bathroom or was in the kitchen. I'd catch her deleting messages or hiding her screen when I got close. She told me I was being paranoid, that I didn't trust her, which made me doubt myself. But I knew something was off. The worst part was how she'd be bitchy and dismissive when I asked about her phone or her plans. She'd roll her eyes, call me paranoid, accuse me of not trusting her. That's when I started feeling like I was losing my mind, like I was the crazy one. One day, I decided to do a little digging. I had access to her email account because she had forgotten to log out on my laptop. I found a string of messages with a guy named Jake, her supposed client, but the messages quickly turned flirtatious. Things about meeting up after work, late-night texts about how much they missed each other, and some pretty explicit stuff about sex. I couldn't believe it. My wife, the woman I loved, was cheating on me with my best friend. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the fact that she lied so convincingly for so long. And then I remembered the money. Had always been good with money, but she suddenly started talking about investments, new credit cards, and expenses I didn't know about. I checked our joint bank account. There was a sudden transfer of $350, $0 from my inheritance, which I'd kept in a separate account for emergencies. I never authorized that. It was gone. I asked her about it, and she told me she'd invested it in a big scheme, that it was for our future. But I knew better. She'd been planning something. That's when I started putting the pieces together. The lies, the secret accounts, the late-night calls, and that massive inheritance she claimed she was investing in. And then the house, our house, she was trying to claim during the divorce. I caught her in a lie about that too. She said she'd been talking to a lawyer about refinancing the house, but I found out she'd been secretly working with a shady real estate agent to try and push me out. I realized she was not just cheating on me emotionally, but manipulating the entire situation to get what she wanted: money, the house, everything. The worst part, she's so good at lying. She even convinced her family I was the bad guy. She told everyone I was controlling, paranoid, and that I was the one cheating. Meanwhile, she was sneaking around, stealing my inheritance and plotting her next move. I felt like I was living in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. My trust was shattered, my money was slipping away, and the woman I loved was nothing like the woman I thought I knew. I didn't know what to do at first. I just sat there, stunned, trying to process how everything had gone so wrong so fast. But I knew one thing: I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Not without a fight. After I uncovered everything, the affair, the stolen inheritance, her plan to push me out of the house, I felt a mix of rage, betrayal, and helplessness that was almost unbearable. I never thought I'd be that guy, the one who gets cheated on by his wife and loses everything because of it. But here I was, staring at the cold reality of my situation, realizing how deep her lies went and how much she'd been manipulating me all along. The first thing I did was confront her, even though I knew it was going to be ugly. I remember calling her after work, trying to sound calm but feeling like my voice was trembling. I told her I knew about the affair, about the money, everything. Her reaction was classic. She flipped the script on me instantly. She started calling me paranoid, accused me of invading her privacy, and insisted I was imagining things. She said I was crazy to think she'd cheat on me, especially with Jake, my best friend. She told me I was overreacting, that I was jealous and insecure. That's when I realized just how good she was at lying. She could spin any story to make herself look innocent, even while she was caught red-handed. But I wasn't buying it. I pulled out the evidence, the emails, bank statements, the transfer records, and I laid it all out. Her eyes widened when she saw the proof, but her face quickly twisted into a sneer. She started screaming, calling me a jealous, controlling asshole who was just jealous of her success. She said I was crazy to think she'd cheat, that I was just insecure because I wasn't making enough money or couldn't keep her happy. She even had the nerve to say she was trying to build a future for us, and I was just sabotaging it with my distrust. It was the most surreal moment of my life. I'd never seen her like that, so manipulative, so cold. Deep down, I felt devastated. I loved her, or at least I thought I did. But her words, her lies, they cut me to the bone. I could see the woman I married turning into someone else entirely, someone who would do anything to get what she wanted. I was angry at her, but I was also hurt. Hurt that I'd been so blind, hurt that I'd trusted her all these years. And then came the shocker. She admitted to the affair, but with a twisted smile she told me it was just sex, nothing serious, and that Jake was just a distraction. She said she never loved him, only wanted the money and the house. That's when I realized she was trying to gaslight me, make me doubt everything. I started spiraling after that. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious. I couldn't believe I'd been played so badly. I thought about all the late nights, the anniversaries, the family dinners. Everything now felt like a lie. I was losing my mind trying to process it all. How could she do this? How could she lie so convincingly? I kept asking myself if I missed signs, if I was just blind. But the truth was, she was a master at hiding her tracks, and I was just too trusting, too naive to see what was really going on. I decided I needed to get out of there, at least temporarily. I didn't want to blow up everything right then, but I knew I had to get away from her. I packed a bag and stayed at a friend's place for a few nights. During that time, I spent hours going over everything, trying to figure out my next move. I knew she was planning her next step, probably to try and claim more of the house or even lie her way into more money. That's when I realized I had to fight back, not just emotionally but legally. I needed to protect what was mine, my inheritance, my house, my reputation. In the days that followed, I reached out to a lawyer. It was a brutal process. I had to gather every piece of evidence, document her lies, and prepare for what was coming. I knew she'd do anything to keep her hands on the money, on the house, on whatever she could manipulate. I was determined not to let her get away with it. I also started secretly recording conversations, just in case I needed them in court. It was a dirty game, and I knew she was capable of playing dirty too. Meanwhile, his behavior got even more bitchy and manipulative. She started spreading lies to her family, telling them I was an abusive control freak, that she was trying to fix me, and that I was the one cheating. She even hired a lawyer behind my back, trying to push me out of the house and claim the inheritance as her own. I couldn't believe how far she was willing to go. Every time I thought I had a handle on things, she threw another curveball. It was like she was determined to ruin me, to take everything I had worked for, all while maintaining this innocent victim act. I felt like I was fighting a war I couldn't win, but I also knew I had to stand my ground. I couldn't let her destroy what little stability I had left. I was angry, yes, but I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I trusted her for so long, but now I saw her for what she really was, a manipulative, selfish woman who only cared about herself and money. I didn't want to be her victim anymore. I wanted justice. I wanted my life back, and I was prepared to do whatever it took to get it. The more I dug into her lies, the more I realized how deep her deception went. It was not just cheating. She was orchestrating an entire scheme to drain me financially and grab everything she could. Every new piece of evidence I uncovered made me more furious. She'd been secretly funneling money out of our joint accounts, using fake invoices and fake investments she claimed were for our future. She even managed to get her hands on the inheritance 350, zero I'd kept aside for emergencies, and she transferred it into a shady offshore account. I found out because I was monitoring the bank statements after she started acting even more bitchy and dismissive, accusing me of being paranoid. Turns out, I was right all along. I remember the day I finally confronted her again, this time with everything laid out on the table. I showed her the bank transfer records, the emails with the shady real estate agent, and the evidence of her affair with Jake. Her face twisted in anger, but she fought back with her usual lies. She told me the money was for business investments, that I was just jealous because she was finally trying to build something for us. She claimed Jake was just a friend, that she only had sex with him once or twice, and that I was overreacting. She looked me dead in the eyes and said, "You're crazy. You think I'd cheat on you with Jake. You're paranoid just like everyone says." It was the moment I realized she was a master manipulator. She could spin any lie, deny anything, and make me doubt my own instincts. I felt my stomach twist with anger and helplessness. I knew she was lying, but her words made me question myself. I wanted to believe she was innocent, that maybe I was overreacting. But then I looked at the evidence again, and it was undeniable. She was sleeping with Jake, stealing money, and trying to cover her tracks, all while telling me I was the crazy one. What hit me hardest was the emotional toll. I'd loved her, I'd trusted her, and now I saw how she'd been using that trust against me. I felt betrayed to my core. The woman I thought I knew was just a facade, a manipulative bitch who'd been planning her escape for months. That realization tore me apart. I had to get out of this nightmare, but I also knew that I couldn't just leave her be. She'd already started her next move, trying to claim the house, asserting that I was an unfit husband and spreading lies to her family and friends. I decided I needed to take control of the situation. I contacted a lawyer and we started preparing for a long legal battle. I wanted to protect what was mine, my inheritance, my house, my reputation. But I also knew that was dangerous. She had already crossed so many lines and I had to be careful. I set up surveillance, recorded her conversations, and kept every piece of evidence I could find. It was a game of chess, and I had to think several moves ahead. Meanwhile's attitude grew even more bitchy and aggressive. She started throwing fits, accusing me of ruining her life, saying I was controlling and paranoid. She told her family I was abusive, trying to turn everyone against me. She hired her own lawyer and began pushing for full custody of the house, claiming she was the victim in all this. It was unbelievable how she could lie so convincingly, even as I knew the truth. I saw her for what she was, a manipulative, selfish woman who would do anything to get her hands on my money and our home. At that point, I knew I had to cut her out of my life entirely. I couldn't keep living in this chaos. I made the decision to file for divorce, not just to separate from her, but to fight for what was rightfully mine. I was determined to expose her lies, to reclaim my inheritance, and to keep my house. I wasn't going to let her manipulate her way into stealing everything I'd worked for. It was going to be a long, ugly fight, but I was ready. I had no choice but to stand my ground and protect what little remained of my dignity and my future. The emotional toll was brutal. I felt like I was losing my mind some days. The betrayal, the lies, the constant game of deception, it was exhausting. But deep down, I knew I had to stay strong. I had to fight for myself, for the truth, and for whatever shred of sanity I had left. Every day was a battle, but I refused to let her win. I realized that the only way forward was to confront everything head-on, no matter how painful it was. The legal fight was as ugly as I expected, if not more. The manipulations didn't stop just because we were headed to court. She doubled down on her lies, playing the victim even more aggressively. She'd scream at her lawyer, throw tantrums during meetings, and try to spin stories about how I was abusive and controlling. All the while, she continued to deny everything: her affair, the stolen money, her plans to take the house, and insisted she was the wronged party. I spent countless hours with my lawyer trying to prepare for her next move. We dug into her financial records more thoroughly, uncovering even more suspicious transactions, payments to fake companies, offshore accounts, and cash withdrawals. I had to be meticulous because I knew she'd try to hide or destroy evidence. I also hired a private investigator who confirmed my suspicions. She'd been meeting Jake regularly, and they had been planning how to push me out of the house. The pie even caught them together a few times, sneaking around late at night. Seeing those photos was like a punch in the stomach, but I knew I had to keep going. Meanwhile, lies to her family and friends intensified. She painted herself as the victim, claiming I was an obsessive control freak who was trying to ruin her life. She told her sister I was emotionally abusive, that I'd been cheating on her, which was laughable given what I had on her, and that I was trying to steal the house out from under her. She even went as far as to claim I was violent, something I never even came close to. I had to hold back my anger every time I heard her spinning stories, knowing she was doing everything to turn people against me. I couldn't let her win that battle. The most infuriating part was how she kept trying to manipulate the situation to her advantage. She'd threaten to accuse me of abuse if I didn't give her what she wanted, or she'd try to intimidate me into dropping the case. She even hired a fake therapist to testify that I was mentally unstable, another lie, of course. I knew she was capable of anything to get her way. That's when I realized I had to stay one step ahead. I couldn't let her get away with her lies, not if I was going to keep what was mine. Throughout all this, I felt like I was slowly losing my mind. Every day brought new surprises, more lies, new accusations, and attempts to manipulate the system. It was draining emotionally and physically, but I also learned a lot about myself. I learned how to stand my ground, how to be strategic, and how to protect what's mine. I started to see her for what she really was, a manipulative, selfish bitch who'd do anything to get her hands on my money and our house. And despite how angry I was, I knew I couldn't let her see me break. I also started building a support system. I talked to friends, leaned on my family, and even saw a therapist myself. The stress was overwhelming, and I needed someone to help me process all these emotions. I wasn't used to feeling so vulnerable, but I knew I had to stay strong, not just for myself, but for the fight I was about to win. I kept telling myself, this isn't over yet. I will come out of this with my life and my money intact. One of the most shocking moments came when the lawyer tried to push for full custody of the house, claiming I was an unfit husband because of her lies. She even filed a counterclaim accusing me of harassment and emotional abuse, trying to paint me as the villain. It was a desperate move, but it showed how far she was willing to go. I knew I had to fight harder, gather more evidence, and stay focused. I couldn't let her manipulate the court or her family anymore. I had to prove her lies wrong, expose her schemes, and show everyone who she really was. In the end, I realized that the only way I could truly win was by staying honest, transparent, and relentless. I couldn't let her drag me down into her mess. I had to keep my head clear, trust my instincts, and keep fighting for what was rightfully mine. I knew this was just the beginning of a long road, but I was determined to come out on top. No matter how much she lied, no matter how many tricks she played, I was not going to let her steal my life, my money, or my house. I was done being the victim. I was going to be the one who fought back and won. The court proceedings dragged on for what felt like forever. Every hearing, every filing, every deposition revealed more of ruthless manipulation. She was good at hiding her true intentions, but I had enough evidence now to blow her lies out of the water. Still, the court battles took a toll on me emotionally. I'd sit in those hearings, hearing her testify with that bitchy smirk, trying to convince everyone that I was the bad guy. I could see through her act, but it still hurt, seeing her lie and spin stories while I was sitting there, feeling helpless and furious. One of the worst moments was when the lawyer tried to push for full custody of the house, claiming I was unfit because I supposedly lost my temper during depositions. It was pure bullshit, but she knew how to play the victim card well. I had to produce evidence that I was responsible, emotionally stable, and that her claims were unfounded. I even hired my own therapist to testify that I was a good husband and father, despite attempts to paint me as the villain. It was a fight for every inch, and I knew I had to stay sharp. Meanwhile, lies continued to escalate. She tried to turn her own family against me, claiming I was abusive, manipulative, and that I'd been cheating on her too, which was just a sick joke. She even staged fake proof of her innocence, fake texts, fake emails, and tried to get her friends to testify that I was a terrible husband. It was surreal. I'd never thought she had that kind of sinister side, but I also knew that her desperation was a sign she was losing control. The money situation was the most critical part of the case. I had already uncovered her attempts to drain my inheritance, but now she was trying to claim ownership of the house, saying she contributed more to the mortgage and renovations than I did. She hired a lawyer to argue that she deserved half of everything, including the inheritance she secretly stole. I fought back with the evidence I had, proof of her transfers, her secret accounts, and her lies about the house. I hired a forensic accountant to trace the money she'd stolen, and that turned out to be a game changer. There was one moment that stood out, once lawyer produced a fake document claiming she'd paid for part of the house's renovations. It was a blatant lie. I had the original receipts, bank statements, and even witnesses who confirmed. I paid for everything. I was furious. I stood up in court and presented the irrefutable proof, watching her face drain of color. That's when I realized how much she'd been lying and how desperate she was to hold on to her lies. I knew I had to keep fighting. Throughout all this, I felt like I was losing my mind. Every day was of anger, sadness, and frustration. I'd go home after the hearings and sit alone, questioning everything. How did I miss all this? How did she manage to hide her true self for so long? The betrayal cut so deep I didn't think I'd ever trust anyone again. But I also knew I had to stay strong, because this fight wasn't just about the money or the house. It was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my sanity. One thing that kept me going was the realization that I wasn't alone in this. I had friends and family who believed in me, who saw through her lies. They told me to stay focused, to keep fighting for what was rightfully mine. I learned that I had to be strategic, patient, and ruthless in exposing her schemes. She kept trying to manipulate the system, but I was prepared for her next move. I'd spent months preparing, gathering evidence, and building my case. I knew she was dangerous, but I also knew I had the truth on my side. Finally, after all the court battles, the judge made a ruling. It wasn't exactly what I hoped for, but it was enough to stop her from taking everything. The court awarded me the house and most of the inheritance, minus some legal fees and her share of the joint debts. She was furious, but there was nothing she could do. Her manipulations had been exposed and her lies had been proven false. I felt a wave of relief. Finally, I had some semblance of justice, but the emotional scars were still there. Looking back, I realize how much I learned from this nightmare. I learned that trust is fragile and some people will do anything to get what they want. I learned that you have to be vigilant, even with those you love. And I learned that sometimes, the only way to survive is to fight back with everything you've got. This betrayal changed me forever, but I refuse to let her define my future. I'm rebuilding my life now, slowly but surely, and I know I'll come out of this stronger. If there's one thing I'd tell anyone going through something similar, trust your instincts, document everything, and never underestimate how far someone will go to deceive you. Because in the end, the truth always comes out. Now that I've finally reached the end of this ordeal, I can honestly say I've learned more than I ever thought I would about trust, betrayal, and the true cost of deception. Actions didn't just tear apart our marriage, they almost destroyed everything I had worked for, my money, my home, my sense of stability. The emotional toll was brutal, but I'm grateful I fought through it. I realized that in life, sometimes you have to go through hell to truly appreciate the peace you find on the other side. Looking back, I see how she played me from the start. The subtle lies, the secret accounts, the manipulations, all carefully crafted to serve her own selfish ends. She was never the woman I thought she was. She was a master manipulator, a liar, a thief. And yet somehow I survived her game. I kept my integrity, I kept fighting, and I refused to let her win by default. The court's decision was a victory, But it wasn't just about the house or the money. It was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my sense of self. One thing I know for sure now is that betrayal like this leaves scars, big ones. But scars can also serve as lessons. I've become more cautious, more aware of the signs of manipulation, and more determined to protect myself in the future. I've also learned how important it is to rely on your instincts and to trust the people who truly have your back. No one is immune from betrayal, but you can choose how to respond. I chose to fight, to expose her lies, and to walk away with my head held high. Finally, I want to say to anyone reading this who might be in a similar situation, don't ignore the signs. Trust your gut. Document everything. Build a support system. And never, ever let someone manipulate you into losing everything you've worked for. Justice isn't always quick, and sometimes the truth takes a long time to come out. But it will come out, and when it does, you'll realize that standing your ground is the only way to truly win. I'm still healing, still putting the pieces of my life back together, but I'm hopeful now. Hopeful that I'll find happiness again, that I'll trust again, carefully this time, and that I'll never let anyone pull the wool over my eyes like that again. May have taken a lot from me, but she didn't take my resilience. I refuse to let her define my future. I've learned that the real power lies in standing up for yourself, no matter how dark things get. So, to anyone out there fighting their own battle, keep going. Keep fighting for what's right. Because in the end, honesty, integrity, and perseverance are what truly matter. And no matter how much someone tries to lie, cheat, or manipulate, the truth always finds a way to come out.